Hello, virtual educators. This is Kelly Austin, and in this video, I'm going to go over the LTVD group roles with you. The group roles are the foundation for student ownership of their learning. This is where that student-centered environment is created. And I want you to imagine that you log in as I do every week, and your students are in their small little groups. Okay, you log into each one and they have gotten started. They don't need you. All I do is I post an announcement right on the whiteboard. Anything that I want to say to them, like good evening, I say some encouraging words. If there's anything specific I want to say to that group or to the class in general, I will put it in each group's whiteboard. And then they start off with their sound check, and they go through the whole process without my interference. Now, when it's necessary, I interfere, I interject, I should say, or I provide, guidance when I need to. But ultimately, once students master these group roles and they master the LTVD process, which I told you takes 2 to 3 weeks, once they have it under their belt, it is amazing to see how they blossom and how they take ownership of their learning and that they facilitate their own learning process without you. And that can be very scary for some instructors. If you want to be the sage on the stage, if you want to be the center of attraction, then this process is not for you. But if you want your students to really grow and learn and you want to become a better instructor, then this method this is one of the instructional methods that you really should seriously consider including in your instructional toolbox. So that's my soapbox about that. So let's get started. Okay, so there are 5 permanent group roles, okay? And students volunteer for the role of their choice. You don't assign these roles to students. When they come into the virtual session, they sign up for these roles. And I showed you that in a previous video as how those roles are. The first person who enters the session lists the group roles, these roles that we're about to see, and as they come in, they volunteer. These roles are maintained for the entire unit if you decide to do a thematic unit type of structure. If you don't do a thematic unit type of structure, you want to have these students to keep these roles for at least a month. So in my other courses where I do cooperative learning, other frameworks that I do, they keep the same role until the month changes. So if we start class in February, of course the class starts in January, but we start meeting online at the end of February, I would have them have those roles until March. Or if we start at the end of February, they would have like the last week of February and the whole month of March. Then they switch roles for April. Then they switch roles for May. Okay, and typically they're only going to meet one time in May because we get out, the first week in May. But you want them to have the same consistent role, these permanent group roles, so that they can master them. That's the reason. Now, what are these roles? The roles are group leader, timekeeper, whiteboard technician, reporter, and publisher. Okay? Now, you're also going to have 2 rotating group roles with the LTVD. These roles are going to change every time they meet, okay? Because they require a little work. So, in order for people not to get overwhelmed with a lot of responsibilities, these roles float or rotate. Okay, so those roles happen to be the editor. It changes each session, and the reflector. So if I'm the editor this week, then I won't be the editor next week. Somebody else will be the editor next week. Somebody else will be the editor the following week. Okay, so we rotate the role of editor because it has such a high responsibility, and we rotate the role of reflector. All right, so let's talk about these permanent group roles. These roles do not rotate. All right, the first one is the group leader. The group leader is the very first role. All right, so the group leader is going to help us to begin the session on time. The group leader is responsible for making sure if you have your session set to start at 6 o'clock, like mine starts at 6:30, then that group leader's responsibility is to start the group session on time with a roll call and a microphone check. So he or she will simply go down the list of the people that they see in the chat box and call their name, and the person will respond, "Hi," or "I'm here," or whatever you would have, whatever they feel comfortable saying. Okay, so then the group leader is also going to be the person who monitors the discussion. The group leader needs to ensure that everyone contributes to the discussion of every single step. And we talked about that in a previous video where they speak first and they post secondly. So it's up to the group leader to make sure that I teach them to go from the top of the chat box to the bottom, or from the bottom of the chat box to the top in terms of the names that are listed. But it's up to the group leader to make sure that everybody is contributing. So they might say, "Oh, Kelly, you didn't give your response. Did you have any vocabulary words?" And then let Kelly respond. Okay. So that's another role for the group leader. The group leader also is going to be the person that makes sure that every task is completed. Every single task of the LTD is completed, and it keeps the group on task. So that person is going to have to make sure they have the steps in front of them. I tell them to print all the documents that are on the course shell, have the 8 steps in front of them to make sure that they are going through all the steps and that they do them sequentially. They are not to do them out of order. Okay, so the group leader makes sure that they do them sequentially. And then the group leader is also the person who emails the instructor of any particular problems that might need to be addressed, whether they're related to specific participants or the group as a whole. For example, let's say somebody is rude and disrespectful. This is something the group leader would want to email me about. They may also decide they want to set up an appointment with me. Maybe they don't want to email it, they want to discuss it. So they can also set up an appointment with you, the instructor. And so the group leader is really kind of responsible for, looking at the synergy of the group. Hopefully they're not the person with the negative attitude, but they want to look at the synergy of the group. If there's any issues or concerns, that's the person that is going to come to you. So that is one of our primary roles is the group leader. And you're going to find oftentimes some students just shy away from ever wanting to be the group leader. And then there's those students in my courses that they always want to be the group leader. All right. And so the other thing is that the group leader, I almost forgot, closes the session. Okay, and so what they do when they close the session is they do 3 things. Number 1, they ask if there are any questions, they clarify any confusion. Then they remind the reflector and the editor, which we'll talk about, of their responsibilities for the evening. And they remind the group of information pertaining to the next week's session, such as the article or chapter that's going to be read, and anything and who the editor and reflector will be for the next session. Okay, so the group leader is going to close out the session. They don't wait for me to close out the session. In fact, if they finish all 8 steps before 8:30, because we're in class from 6:30 to 8:30, if they finish before 8:30, the group leader dismisses them. They don't have to sit there and wait for me. So the group leader is basically in charge, if you will. All right, the next role is the timekeeper. The timekeeper is really important because he or she ensures that the group sticks to the allotted blocks of time given by the instructor on the LTD process plan. So if they look on the process plan, the person who makes sure that we're sticking within that time frame is the timekeeper. Now, the timekeeper is going to do this by posting reminders of the time in the chat box, and they're going to verbally keep the group on task with the time. So what I teach them to do is tell us how much time we have left. Don't just say it's 6:30, because we can clearly see, what time it is. Everybody has a little clock in the right corner of their, computer. So we don't want you to tell us what time it is. We want you to tell us if we had 20 minutes for this particular section, we only have 5 more minutes left. Or you guys, we were supposed to be finished with this section 5 minutes ago. Okay. Another thing that I teach them is if the group starts late or if they begin early, because I forgot to mention the group leader can start the session early if all the group members are there before 6:30 and they all agree that they want to get started early, they can get started early. Okay, so if that's the case, if the group starts early or the group starts late, and therefore their times are a little different from what's on the LTVD process plan, then the timekeeper wants to just look at the block of time. So let's say for vocabulary, they're supposed to spend 10 minutes. The timekeeper wants to be making sure that they spend about 10, that 10 minutes is acknowledged, that, that they stay within that time frame. However, as I mentioned in a previous video, it just depends. If the article is longer, they might spend more than 10 minutes on vocabulary. If it's short, they might just spend 5 minutes on vocabulary and they just go to the next step. But the timekeeper is the person that's going to keep them abreast of all of that. The next role is very important as well, and that's the whiteboard technician. Now, the whiteboard technician is the person who pulls up the editor's template that I've shown you and shares the editor's template via his or her desktop. So just like you're looking at my PowerPoint right now on my desktop, the whole group is going to look at the whiteboard technician's desktop. And so what the whiteboard technician is going to do is that person is going to paste the group responses on the template. And we also talked about that in a previous video. So as I speak the word that I want to define, then I give an example, I put that in the chat box. The editor is going to take that information, copy and paste. It's Control C to copy, Control V to paste when we use Blackboard. And so you would have to see, I'm sure it's probably the same in another LMS. So then they would go ahead and post and paste that information onto the editor's template, which I have shown you in a previous video. So that's what the whiteboard technician does. They go from the chat box and take the information and put it on the whiteboard. For example, when they're trying to come up with the author's main message and everybody's posting their main message in the chat box, but then the group has to come up with their own main message, okay? Well, the whiteboard tech is going to post that main message on the actual editor's template, whatever the group finally decides. The whiteboard tech also supports the group leader in monitoring class participation by listing the names of those who participate for specific steps. And so you can refer back to your editor's template to see those places where this says group member number 1, group member number 2. So the whiteboard tech and the group leader are kind of working together. For example, the whiteboard tech might say, Kelly, don't forget to paste your vocabulary terms in the chat box, because as he or she is pasting it on the document, they're looking through the chat box and they may not see that mine in the chat box. So they'll remind me. And so the whiteboard tech and the group leader kind of work together. The group leader might say, if I'm the whiteboard tech, the group leader might say, well, Kelly, do you need a little bit more time to paste the information? I say, yes, give me about 2 more minutes. And so I'm pasting and everybody's waiting patiently for me to do that. Now, as I said over and over again, as I've said, this may seem laborious at first, but as they continue to do it, the whiteboard tech, who's going to do this for some time, will become a master at this and it will flow very easily. All right. Now, if there are any kind of technical difficulties, sometimes you might have technical difficulties. The whiteboard tech may have to just type right onto the actual whiteboard, but hopefully that's not the case. If that happens, they don't have to do that. They can just type on the copy and paste onto their document right where they are without the group being able to see it. If for some reason that board is not working, they can still do their job without sharing their desktop. Okay, so that doesn't stop the show. Okay, they continue to do their job. They can still copy and paste even if for some reason they can't share their desktop. It's just really good, for everyone to be able to see it, but it's not required. Remember, I told you I did this LTVD when we just had the chat box and we couldn't share our desktop. So it can be done. All right. So if after the session, the Whiteboard Tech, I also mentioned that the Whiteboard Tech will need to copy and paste information from the chat box to the editor's template. And then I already mentioned that it's Control C to copy and then Control V to paste the information. I'm just trying to make sure that I give you everything from my notes. Now, this document, once they go through all the 7 steps, because the 8th step is their reflection, but once they go through all 7 steps, the Whiteboard Tech is going to look over the document. It's going to check to make sure, checking for its proofreading, looking for grammatical errors. I encourage my students to use software services like Grammarly.com to help them to edit. And then the Whiteboard Tech is going to submit that rough draft to the editor to edit it further. Okay? So the students are also learning a type of publication process that when you write a book, if you become an author and you are assigned to a major book publishing company, that they're going to have several editors to go over your book, okay, your manuscript. And so they're learning this process, they're learning the publication process by way of creating this document. So once the Whiteboard Tech, the class has ended, let's say we got out of class at 8 o'clock, they're going to look over the document and they're going to make any corrections that they readily see, and then they're going to submit that rough draft to the editor, because it's called what? The editor's template. So guess who's going to edit it? The editor. Okay? So all right, the next role is the publisher. This is our final permanent role. And so the publisher is going to collate each editor's template and each reflection form into one document. Now, you will not need the publisher if you don't do the units. Okay, if you take the LTVD super course, I'm going to show you how to set up your whole semester based on these units, okay, that are grounded in your student learning objectives or your student learning outcomes. Okay, so if you do the units, you're going to need a publisher. Okay, if you don't do the units and you're just going to have them submit each template individually, then the editor is your last stop. The editor will be the last person to edit the document and then submit the document. But if you're doing a unit, I have a person called the publisher who puts together each template, and then they'll have a template and then the reflection form for that template. So for that discussion, the reflection form. The next session, it'll have the template, the editor's template, and then the reflection form. The editor's template and then the reflection form. So let's say there were 3 sessions in that unit. It's going to have 3 editor's templates and 3 reflection forms. Okay? All right, so they're going to collate each editor's template and reflection form into one document. They're going to ensure that the LTD unit is formatted well and looks professional. Like a publishing company would make sure that your book looks professional before they put it out on the stands or before they put it online. Okay? They're also going to use the rubric to assess the quality and accuracy of the document. I have a rubric for the unit. Okay? When they put the unit together, I have a rubric. I don't have a rubric for the individual template. So if you decided to not do the units, then you would need to create your own rubric for that, or I may, do it at some point. But because I teach in units and they submit the whole thing to me at one time, I have a rubric to grade the document as a whole. and that unit is worth 100 points. All right, then the publisher is going to post the entire unit on our main discussion board. I have them to submit it there so other groups can see other groups if they want to. Okay, so everybody can see everybody's unit. It all goes on the main discussion board. And that's what the publisher is responsible for. So let's say if it's due next Wednesday, the whole unit, then the publisher is the one who's responsible for submitting the whole unit on the discussion board by next Wednesday. They're also going to post the reflection form on the file exchange. So you can already see that file exchange is a really important place, and it's a place that holds the students accountable where all the documents are there. And it's really great because my students their class participation is weighed heavily on their grade, and so if somebody says they were in class, or I'm looking at the minutes and the minutes don't say that you were there, we can go back, and I can also, when worst comes to worst, I can pull up the recording. But I have written documentation that one of your group members who took the minutes said that you weren't there. Or I found it's happened before where maybe the reporter may have left somebody's name off by accident, and I know that they were there. So that's why when they email me that night, I can be like, oh, Kelly was in class. I need you to update these minutes, correct the minutes, and post the new updated version to the file exchange. Okay, so all of this, everything goes to the file exchange if you haven't noticed, because we want to have documentation of everything that we do, and it lets the students know how important this process is to the function of their learning and to the function of the class. And then they're going to email the reflection form to the publisher. Why? Because the final document, the book that they're creating, the booklet that they're creating has what? The editor's template, the reflection form. The editor's template, the reflection form. So the reflector is going to email that form to the publisher. All right, so we've come to the end. Now, what you should know about this, I know you're saying, whew, that seems like a lot. You have 5 permanent roles, and then you have 2 roles that rotate. Okay, now my students fill out what's called a group role spreadsheet. So they decide all of this at the beginning of a unit. If you do the unit, which I'm going to teach you in the super course, if you do the unit, they figure this out at the beginning of the unit. Who's going to do what for the whole unit. And then they don't have to talk about it anymore unless somebody's sick or something comes up and they have to have a substitution. They don't have to talk about it anymore. And it may seem like a lot at the beginning, but it's like with anything, you had to learn how to drive. You had to learn how to, put your foot in the brakes at the same time as while steering. You had to learn how to watch the traffic and change lanes and do so many different things. And if you're capable of learning how to drive, then you're capable of doing this LTVD process, because once you teach it to them, there's no turning back. They feel so empowered. Let me not get ahead of myself, and let's read what I have up on the screen. All right, students must be trained on these roles prior to implementation of the LTVD. How do you train them? You create an instructional video, just like what I did with you, explaining every single role. And that's going to be a part of your independent study unit if you do an independent study unit, which of course I advise you to do. Okay, so you can simply explain the roles using screencast software like screencast-o-matic.com in a video. All right, or you can do a demo session where students are able to watch a recorded session where these roles are being fulfilled. We talked about that. You can get some of your colleagues together to meet you in the virtual classroom, and you all run through learning through virtual discussion to show students a sample of how it's done. Okay? Learn with me. The students can fulfill these roles as a whole group with you. So you can have your entire class meet with you in the virtual classroom, and they volunteer for roles. Only 5 people will be able to volunteer, and then you can have them volunteer for editors' roles, and to show them how this process is done, to demonstrate it with them. So they learn with you. They can ask questions of you right then. Students must volunteer for these roles the day of the session. What I tell students is that there's none of this, all this emailing back and forth before you all ever get together and emailing back and forth about the session. No, 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 no. We don't want this to stress people out. We deal with whoever shows up for class on that day. That's who we deal with. That's who volunteers for roles. We don't volunteer absent people for roles. We only deal with people who actually come to class when it comes to volunteering for roles. Okay? We don't send a bunch of emails trying to get people to sign up for roles before the session is held. None of that. They do it when they come to class. Okay? And then you need to have them to maintain those roles, as I said, either monthly or by unit. Students can and do master these roles. I know it seems like a lot, but they can handle this. And they experience ownership of their learning and empowerment as a result of doing so. Now, when I was in college and as an undergraduate, we had this thing where a professor would come to class if they were late. I think we would start passing the roll around. If they didn't have their doctorate, we would start passing it in 10 minutes. And if they had their doctorate, we would pass it in 15 minutes, if I remember correctly. So we'd be sitting there like, somebody got a piece of notebook paper. I mean, we're looking at our watches and we're counting on to the last minute. Well, that doesn't happen with the LTVD because whether I'm there or not, class is being held and they are facilitating their own learning. Is that not beautiful? But I'm logged in and I am, my name shows up in every single group, but they don't need me for anything. So there's no wasted instructional time because you are not necessary to fulfill this process. And if that doesn't get you excited, I don't even know what to tell you. Now, finally, one of the greatest feelings will be when you witness your students facilitating their learning as if they were in an executive board meeting for a Fortune 100 company. You will be amazed at how they support each other, learn from each other, and enjoy each other's presence. A camaraderie will develop as the students proceed through the semester with the same students week after week. I have a video on YouTube that you can go watch called the Virtual Village Workshop Intro, and I would encourage you to listen to that video because my students talk about how they feel like a family and not just peers in a class. They don't feel distant from each other. They feel close because as they go through this process or any of the cooperative learning processes that I implement in my courses, they get to know each other's strengths. They get to like each other, or they get to know who they don't like, but they get to support each other. I've had it turn out positively more than ever. Now, I very, very rarely, I can't even remember a negative experience. Maybe one semester I can think of someone that just didn't have a nice attitude. But and you can feel free to move students around if you need to. I have done that before as well. But overall, they develop a close knit relationship from going through this process. You will be able to assess what they know, what they're able to do, and in what areas they need instruction or guidance. For example, a lot of times students have difficulty with figuring out the main message in an article or in a chapter. And so I can go right into that group and help that group. Another group may not need help with that. Okay. When it comes to the outline, they may need some support with that. I can customize my instruction for that particular group. Or I may notice a particular student within a group is struggling with making a connection between another course and this course, or between another resource from this course and this particular article. They're struggling to make that bridge between those two. So I can either come in and talk to that person right there, okay, or I can email that person, or I can ask that person to set up an appointment with me so we can go over it. There's so many options available to you that are going to help you to facilitate their learning even better, because now you're able to focus on small groups at a time and you have something to measure it by. Okay, not just these discussion boards where anybody could have done for them. Let's be honest. Anybody can post a discussion board post for you. But when they're actually in class and engaging in discussion, you get to know them just as you would face to face. Now, finally, you will be able to customize instruction to meet the needs of your individual groups. And that's what I just said. So I just hope that learning about these roles is getting you excited, and that you can see the vision, and that you can see how incredibly wonderful this process can be, and how wonderful it is. And you can see the reason why I have been doing it for over 14 years at the time of this recording. Well, at about 14 years, because I'll be teaching online for 15 years in just a few minutes, in just a couple of months. So for 14 years, I've been doing this online and tweaking it and perfecting it, and that's what I'm sharing with you. Trust me, be coachable, and I promise you, you will write me a thank you note once you train your students on this and watch them grow. All right, until the next video, I will see you. Bye-bye.